Welcome back to Everything EOS, the official media channel of the EOS Network Foundation, and it is the longest running EOS podcast since March 2018. We are born out of the EOS community for the EOS community, and I'm being joined today with my co-pilot, also from the ENF, Mr. Brandon Lovejoy, and our very special guest, the founder of Greymass, the builder of the Anchor Wallet, an EOS Network Foundation board member, and the very first Eden Head Chief Delegate. Welcome, Aaron Cox. How are you doing today?
Thanks. Doing good. Glad to be here. Different format. Excited to have a chat.
Yeah, so I've been seeing a lot of you. I mean, every single week we do the fireside chats on Wednesdays at 20 UTC on the EOS Discord. Been watching you on the Chief Delegate calls each and every week with Mr. Lovejoy here. And I've also had the pleasure of reading a lot of your co-authoring with the EOS Blue Papers, EOS ENF Blue Papers, let's just call them. So you were what would you call it? The project manager that oversaw them all, but then you're also a co-author for API Plus and the soon to be published Wallet Plus.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know if I was managing per se, but definitely helping coordinate. And like one team would have an idea and it's like, well, maybe this other group should tackle it. And it was like, okay, let's coordinate between the groups and maybe figure out where things belong to kind of keep the themes running of the pillars. But yeah, it was good. It was far too much work. I bit off a lot.
So what was when did those actually kind of start? Around October or before October? I can't really remember myself.
I think it was probably before that when discussions started. The actual like work itself probably started around October, maybe late November for Wallet Plus, just because there was so much going on at the same time. But yeah, it's been probably like 6 months since the very start.
So why don't you shout out all of your co-authors and everyone that really helped out a whole lot in the process?
Yeah, I mean, on the API and Wallet Plus, those were the two I was most involved with, so I have the most knowledge of. For API Plus, it was our team, Greymass, and then EOS Nation and EOS Rio. And then on the Wallet Plus side of things, we had my team again and the Ultra team. We had Rami from Ultra. So there were a lot of people we interviewed. I don't have a list in front of me of all of those people, but we kind of put a call out in November, December, and probably talked to a few dozen different big stakeholders and developers in the ecosystem and just drilled them and said, like, what are your problems? Like, where are your pain points? How can we set something in motion to help you do what you do? And we took pages of notes and tried to incorporate that into the paper. So lots of people. I can't possibly mention them all, but it's a good collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, only people on the actual core of the blue papers typically get the mentions in the document themselves, but I just know that there were so many different contributors in the background of all of them. Even if it's just having a conversation with them in DM and getting some insight, and then somehow that works its way into the papers. So the API Plus paper, it was published, I think, about 2 weeks ago at this point. We're recording this on Friday, March 11th. And out of everything that was proposed in API Plus, so I guess I should take a step back. The reason that you guys were all kind of, you or Greymass, Rio, and Nation were perfect for that is because you guys are all running the main history providing tools. Yeah. So most people have heard of Hyperion and Diffuse, obviously, but yours is kind of not as well known outside of, I guess it's used for Anchor, but not so much independent dApps, right?
It's pretty widely used. If you're using the Greymass API endpoint and you're accessing that version 1 history, it's running on our custom solution. And it's running across all EOS IO chains. So it's not just our EOS endpoint, it's all of the various endpoints. Um, we started it maybe 2 years ago as something we needed. It was during, I don't even remember when it was during, but it was, I think it might have been late 2020 or something. The native history plugin just couldn't keep up anymore with like the high amount of activity we had going on through some of the, I don't want to call it spam, but spam for lack of a better word. And so we had to build something new, and we built something from the ground up that mimicked the old stuff, so that way we could just drop it in and nobody would ever know that anything changed. And so that's what we did, is kind of MacGyver together with some bubblegum and duct tape. And we never released it as kind of an open source project because of that. Like, it was really tied into our servers, and we didn't have instructions on how to run it or how to use it. And since then, we've been slowly evolving it and making it better. And we're planning on open sourcing it at some point in the not too distant future as an alternative for other people to run as well. We think that the way it works can serve as kind of the foundation of future solutions. Sort of like Block One released the Trace API, which nobody ever really hears about either. But that's because it's like this foundational building block of other things. That's probably what ours will be, and it'll let people build solutions for other historical data purposes and potentially even streaming purposes, like Diffuse's Firehose does. So we've learned a lot on how to optimize the data and store it and scale it, and it's the smallest of the full history solutions right now, and probably the fastest, but it's kind of more limited in its capacity. But we're hoping to put some resources behind that and publish it so other people can run it.
I purposefully didn't call it out by name because honestly, I'll probably mess it up, but I'm going to try it. So it's called Roborovsky. How do you say it?
I think so. We just call it Robo. It the name itself, Scott, one of our co-founders, who was the guy that wrote most of it, we're using Golang, and they have the concept of gophers. We're using a database called Badger, and we also have processes we called hamsters. So we have like this whole farm of animals going on, and Robo, whatever it's called, I can't even say it, so don't feel bad. It's a type of small hamster that's like really fast and resilient. So we were like, oh, this is perfect. And that's where we got the name. We had our designer come up with a little logo for it. I think it's a hamster with like a birthday hat on or something. We're just having fun with it.
So you're just taking me down a road I didn't plan to go down with all of these mentions of animals. So I must ask, tell us the story of Fuckhorse.
We've been playing with some of the new AI frameworks that have been coming out over the past maybe 6 months or so. And during some of the naming processes we've been feeding information into this AI, and then be like, hey, help us name these things. And during the EOS.IO Plus rebrand, like when it first started, we first started talking about it in like December or something. We started asking it for lists of names, and we just had it come up with like hundreds of names. Some good, some bad, some vulgar, some just ridiculous. And that's one of them that it came up with. And less so the name, more so the description about it being like this audacious, unapologetic, like pushing forward thing. We shared the list of these names, and that one just kind of stuck within the community and it's kind of become a meme. So we've tried to embrace that.
I'm trying to pull it up because I didn't plan on bringing up this question, but all this talk of animals just
yeah.
Oh my God, they're so
yeah.
Okay, let me read it. So Fuckhorse, a name that reflects the new era of rebellion against the old centralized models. Fuckhorse is audacious, unapologetic, and uncompromising, just like the EOS.IO community.
Yep. Good job, AI.
And then there were all kinds of like images that the AI generated, and some of it was like Picasso-like artwork.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, that's a separate AI, but like we've had these two playing off of each other. We'll use the one that generates text to feed inspiration to the one that generates imagery, and that we have probably like 50 or so images of what quote unquote a fuck horse looks like. And yeah, they do look like Picasso, and some of them look like Demon Spawn, and some of them look just the AI comes up with just crazy things.
But other AIs that kind of detect like NSFW like imagery also triggers on these fuck horse pictures, even though there's like nothing vulgar on them. I tried
Yeah.
sharing one of the AI generated images in Discord, and it kept telling me I wasn't able to because it had adult material in it, even though it had it's
Wow.
100% not adult material. I guess there must have been some sort of phallus imagery in there or something. I have
Yeah,
no
just
idea.
be the name.
It has come up with some of those, and we haven't shared those. Just, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the AI goes down crazy routes.
I think it's like the one thing. So we've gone years of just kind of like the EOS.io ecosystem not really getting along really well, but like it's kind of like Fuck Horse has really brought everyone together because we're in this process where everyone knows we got to like get a new name, new branding for EOS.io. There's a subgroup within the EOS.io Plus working group that's actually working with a brand agency to come up with this new name and brand. And it's nice to have kind of like a temporary one in between. That way we don't have to necessarily call it EOS.io in the meantime. So it's just I didn't really plan on talking about Fuck Horse, man, but it's such a good
Yeah,
story.
it is.
It's gonna live on forever, I think.
It's so abrasive that it just like catches your attention and like it breaks whatever you were thinking about. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't fit everywhere, but certainly applies to this situation with how ridiculous everything else is.
It's like the honey badger of EOS.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
So let's get back into the on-point topics. So the API Plus has already been published. I'll drop the link in the description if you guys want to see it. But one of the things I wanted to do with this conversation today is kind of give a little preview of what everyone could expect with the Wallet Plus Blue Paper, because the English version's done. I have the English version in front of me. I got the Chinese version, the text at least, back in today. It's getting plopped into the branding over the next couple of days. I'm waiting on the Korean translation, then it'll be another 2 days after that. But we're going to publish everything next week. And I'm saying this on Friday, March 11th. So I'll probably publish this video over the weekend. So it'll still be a couple of days before Wallet Plus. What could people expect from the Wallet Plus Blue Paper?
For it to not talk a bunch about wallets, oddly enough. Just, I guess, going back to API real quick, it was originally called History Plus. Like we were all brought together because we were the history providers, kind of like we were just talking about a bit ago. And as we started talking, we were like, well, we really need to focus on APIs in general. History is a subset of APIs, but there's a lot of other things that need to be done on the API side of things. And so we like zoomed out a little bit. We did kind of the same thing in the Wallet Plus paper, but I think we were probably a few months too late to really be like, hey, we should change the name of this. So we're still just running with Wallet Plus. Like Wallet is the like touchstone for people who interact with the blockchain. So it still kind of makes sense. But what you can expect out of Wallet Plus is things that improve the developer experience and make it so that you can build apps easier on this platform. It's going to include SDKs. It's going to include on-chain resources like profile systems and app registries, improvements to things like multi-sig. There are some mentions of like foundational wallet technologies that we could chase down and potentially work on. And just in general, things that help you, the user, interact with the blockchain, or you, the developer, help your users interact with the blockchain. So the thing I think I'm most excited about on that side is the new SDKs. If you've seen any of the developer chats for really any of the chains, at least once a week, I probably respond to somebody saying something along the lines of, we can't do that right now. at least without significant amount of effort on your part, you being the developer who wants to try to do something. And that's because just our SDKs don't fill the needs of developers these days. The chain has changed so much. Well, all of the chains have changed so much since EOS.io originally launched, and yet we're still using the same SDKs that we had at launch. Like, there's no idea what PowerUp is. There's no idea how you can cover resources for your users. There's no way to create accounts. And it's just this we have like Stone Age tools, and like, let's move to the Bronze Age now. You know, we have this evolution that we need to go through before blockchain is really easy to use. And we need to pay attention to this side of things. So to kind of wrap all of that up, I think that the paper probably should have been called Client Plus or something along those lines. So, and it's really the client tools, the software development kits or the SDKs that developers need to build applications and build games and build whatever it is they want to do that interacts with EOS.io.
And the general idea is, so right now, if you're a dApp developer building on EOS.io, regardless of which chain, there's a bunch of nuances and things you need to learn or do before you even start building like the logic of whatever the application is that you actually wanted to build. Yeah. So everyone's reinventing the wheel in their own little silos. And with the SDKs, it's just kind of like plug and play, do all the basic stuff, and then just focus on your application, which is really what the developer probably wants to do anyway in the first place.
Yeah. So there's a lot of wheel reinventing going on. I don't know how many times I've had to answer questions about like, how do I do this with a wallet? And again, the answer sometimes is, I don't know. You know, that's not being done for you. Without like me going into your application, I can't tell you how to do that thing because there's no like module for you to drop in that just does this for you. We've done that on our side, on the GrayMass side of things, for a year or two now. We're providing fuel for users and apps. Like if you integrate Anchor and your users in your app try to do something, Fuel is going to kick in and it's like, all right, we can cover the resources. Or it'll pop up and say, hey, you've burned all your free resources. Do you want to pay a fee? And then we, weave that into the process where it's just one click and, oh, hey, cool. I don't have to go stake or power up or buy Rex or do all of these other things that just get in your way if you're trying to buy an NFT or, move your character in some game or something. So, yeah.
There's just so much friction. So
yeah,
ever since Fuel's been released, it's seriously just been like a godsend because it's bringing that pay as you, not really pay as you go, but pay per transaction model that when EOS and EOS.io first launched, it was kind of like, no, we want this staking mechanism, no transaction fees. But now it's kind of like, that's too much friction for new users. We would rather pay the transaction fee because at the end of the day, it's like, I don't even know how many 0.00s there are before the one to what the transaction cost actually is, but it's nothing. And with the Anchor wallet, you guys have been successful in abstracting that from your end user. So it just does that calculation. It either gives you the free transaction, or if it makes you pay for it, it just does it for you, does the deduction for you as long as you're holding some EOS.
And one of the big problems is like, we did that, but we can only do it for Anchor right now. Like, we can't do it if you're using any other wallet. And that is because, again, of these SDKs. Like, the SDKs themselves can't handle this type of process. Ours can, because we've kind of ejected out of the SDKs that are publicly available. Or I shouldn't say that. Our SDKs are publicly available too. The SDKs that Block One built just can't do this stuff. Whereas the SDKs we built can, and now we're building everything based on like this layers of technologies that we've created over the years.
I was actually wondering where you think we're at in terms of adapting the new resource model chain wide so that it's like abstracted away even further, because I know it's still like we're kind of in this weird in between phase where some people are still staking for resources and other people are trying to, pay as you go, and some like Graymass and Anchor is taking one approach, and other wallets are kind of taking different approaches. Like, where do you think we're at in terms of transitioning to use that model more?
We're getting close to being able to just handle it for users. That was, as we've been talking about, that was one thing I thought about, was one of the promises of this new system was so that apps could cover the resources of their users. Like, we're talking about the wallet covering the costs right now, but this promise of apps being able to easily cover resources for users, that still really doesn't exist unless the app goes out and builds it on their own. We've documented how we do it as Anchor, and we're working towards, like, we'd like that to be a standard way for it to happen. But this again kind of comes back to the SDKs themselves. And it's like, whoever's building that app just needs something they can drop in and say, like, pay true, and it just happens for them. Like, they might have to go manage their own account and maybe run a service or something, but like, they shouldn't have to like rework their entire application to make this a reality. And that the software just doesn't exist for that. So in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I think the release of PowerUp and even the release of Rex put us at like the halfway mark. And then we just sat there for a long time. We still have a long way to go before it's, anybody can build an application and there's this like thing they can turn on and this thing they can run and then just pay for all of their users' resources. Maybe they pay for the account creation. And so like, you could make a game on chain that, new user signs up and gets an account created for free, and new user just starts playing the game and never has to actually have any tokens because the app's just paying for all their resources. Like, that is a possibility of where we could go in the future and just make it so much easier for apps.
So as you're speaking, it kind of reminded me. So you're also part of EOSIO Plus, kind of representing all chains. Like, it's funny because we're trying to figure out like a governance model for how all of these chains could work together to make these decisions. And we're in this like weird spot because like most of the other representatives are from like the foundation, like with Talos or with Goodblock, who's like core dev basically. And then we have like Wax, like Lucas, he's the CTO of Wax, like the company. And then Ultra's kind of just, they don't try to be a decentralized chain, so they have a decision maker. But then we have this weird situation because we have Graymass there, and they just like represent everybody. You are like the voice of the people, pretty much, of like every chain, and you have such broad insight. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of when we started EOSIO Plus. The idea was to define what the core protocol functionality was that all of the chains have in common, and without being able to rely on Block One for the continuous development of EOSIO, the protocol, how could we all come together to kind of share in the costs and development of the EOSIO protocol itself? But what came out of that very, very quickly, and you're one of the first people to point it out because you're already so far into the blue papers, was that these SDKs are just as much part of EOSIO as the protocol itself. Yeah. So you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I guess full background, we, since maybe 2019, we're really pushing to have the SDKs improved. This was like EOS Voter was still a thing, and I don't even know if Anchor was a brand yet. We were still thinking a Block One wallet and sort of protocols were going to come out. We were pitching SDK needs at Block One at that point and saying like, we need this thing improved, we need to stop doing this and maybe do this. And we were, throwing proposals that way and saying, hey, let's do this. We have ideas. And that's kind of when Anchor started to come about. The EOSIO signing request started. We started forming it together after we saw the EOSIO authenticator that Block One did. And then Anchor ultimately is where we landed. And beyond that, then we started working on core SDKs. We actually call it EOS.IO core is the name of our JavaScript library. That's what lets us do the transaction resource coverage. So we've been doing this stuff for a long time and we tried to pull Block One in that direction for a pretty long time. And after just throwing our hands up in the air, we're like, fine, I guess we're doing this all. So we've been slowly building this stuff over the years. I mean, if you go look at our GitHub repository, it is just this like collection of, I want to say like layers of software that we would have expected to come out of the core team that was building the protocol, because you need this stuff to drive the product home. So I think that's why when Greymass comes into the EOS.IO Plus group, we're kind of championing for all of the different chains. It's because we're a couple of years ago, I guess we just kind of decided to do what we thought Block One should have done. So we kind of took on that core development hat and just fastened it to our head and started pushing ahead. And that was the point in time where we branched out and we were no longer just an EOS block producer. We signed up for, I don't remember what order, but we went on to Wax and Telos and Theo and Proton and a few others that we may have joined and then left. You know, not all EOS.IO chains launch and then get traction. But I think that's kind of in part why when we came into EOS.IO Plus, we were championing this idea. It's because we were trying to do it for years already. We were trying to do it with Block One, trying to push them in that direction. And now that we have this collaborative chain thing going on, where it's all the chains coming together to make decisions and hopefully all to kind of collectively pool resources to make this happen, we had this track record of trying to push this narrative already. And we still, like, to this day, believe that is where we need to go. So I think that's just why our voice has come into the conversation this way. It may, like, on one hand, it feels like I may be biased because I'm like, oh, this is what we've been doing, support us. But on the other hand, it still really is like the points that I will try to make is that no, we really think this is where this technology needs to go. And this is the path to get there. And here are some ideas. And honestly, being able to work on the papers for the last 6 months has let us put those ideas to paper. The Wallet Plus paper that's coming out soon encapsulates a lot of that stuff. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about it with people who have read it, because I could sit here for like the next hour and talk about those ideas. But like, if people can have that context beforehand, and then we can just like have a conversation about that, I think people will see the vision and we'll align and be able to move forward.
So we've all kind of been on this incredible journey with the blue papers. We talked about the EOS.IO Plus working group. You guys have been, like we said, since at least October, just heads down in these blue papers. It's almost like you're in college again, studying for a final exam for months. Now that you're done with the papers are published. It's going to take weeks for everyone to really absorb them. You said you want to have conversations with people once they've had time to absorb these papers. They're just not something you could absorb overnight, especially when there's 4 of them. This is the 4th one to be published. Some people are probably still on the 2nd one. Then there was the Fractally white paper that was published in the middle there, and everyone wants to talk about that. And it kind of took a lot of the attention away from the blue papers, which is fine. It's good to have just a lot of stuff going on. But now that you're done writing these blue papers, we're kind of in the feedback phase and waiting for like the next steps of what's going to get funded next to kind of get built. What are you most looking forward to doing now that you can get back to your like normal day-to-day rather than the blue paper day-to-day, which sounds like it was very, very difficult and draining?
It was. Writing is not our strong suit. Like, we've spent years developing, but it was good to do that like retrospective and like take a breath. Not that it was really a breath. I think right now we're kind of catching our breath is a good metaphor as to what's going on right now. We're reorienting ourselves over. We were just really starting to pick up steam on Unicove before this blue paper process started. And we brought in a new developer during the blue paper process who we had getting familiar with Unicove and rebranding it, because as of right now, it's still the untitled web wallet. So I think a lot of us are really excited to get back to that. The user interfaces are all going to move there from Anchor. Anchor is going to turn into what you'd see in the mobile version right now, where it's an authenticator. Like you're going to use it to import your accounts. It's going to have your keys. It's going to be secure. You'll be able to do very basic things with it. And then all the advanced stuff is going to be in Unicove. And by advanced, I just mean the stuff that most people are going to use. Our goal with that is really to create the most user-friendly experience we possibly can for the EOS.io chain. Whether that's you want to transfer tokens, you want to stake your token somewhere to earn a return. We might dabble in NFTs. We want you to be able to see your accounts and see what's happened with your accounts. And really just be able to like leverage the things on chain in the most easy way possible. So we're heading that direction on one side. We're also starting to push on Robo again, which we spent a couple months last summer working on it pretty hard. And then just kind of set it down as we went into the blue papers. But we'd like to be able to get that to a polished state where we can open source it with some documentation. I don't know what sort of support we'll be able to offer until we get some more people involved on that side of things. So those are two projects we're looking forward to. There's a lot to do with Anchor still that we're wrapping our head around. I think we have a couple dozen major initiatives that we need to do with Anchor. One of them being like a complete redo of the desktop version. We need it's very much got a little bit of EOS Voter still left in it, and it's got to morph into what the mobile experience is. And we think it'll be easier to just start over on that end and spend a couple months just hammering through it and building essentially Anchor 2 for desktop. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. I know there's so much. We need to localize Anchor so that way it's in multiple languages. That'll come after it's simplified. We need to improve account creation still. We need to do some bulk account creation stuff. I don't have the list in front of me, but there's a lot to do. And I think taking a break right now is kind of the priority. I mean, I've been doing a lot of talking and a lot of meetings still over the last couple of weeks, but taking a small break and still catching our breath. Oh, my co-pilot's here. Yeah, that's in the immediate future. Shaving this launch beard or this blue paper beard, maybe.
So you brought up Unicove and explained it as a web wallet. So when a lot of people familiar with all the EOS.io chains talk about kind of like the onboarding experience that works and has been proven, a lot of people point to the Wax Cloud wallet and how simple they made user onboarding. Is that kind of like the end goal of what you'd like to be able to do with Unicove? And how would you achieve that without kind of landing in the whole custody, being a custodian of people's keys areas? Because that's where Wax Cloud wallet, Wax the company must have some kind of licensing, probably. I don't know off the top of my head, but probably in an island, Caribbean country that they're able to do that. And you and Greymass being in the US, I mean, obviously you could domicile anywhere for something like this, but knowing you, I'm guessing you'd want to do it in a non-custodial way.
Yeah.
How do we get there?
We did a lot of research on this topic before the blue papers, and then we put some of that research into the Wallet Plus paper. One of the proposals is for what we're calling a web authenticator, I think. We went back and forth on that term a number of times, but we think there is a way to do non-custodial signing in the browser. It's not going to be incredibly secure. It'll probably be about as secure as a browser extension wallet, which that's a whole rabbit hole we don't have to get into. But we think we could offer onboarding in Unicove. So like you can create an account right there without downloading anything. No browser extension, no Anchor, no nothing. And it will, like, you'll create a backup sheet just like you would an Anchor, and that'll be your owner key, and it's offline. You don't have to worry about that. And then there will be some form of your everyday use key in your browser, and you'll authenticate with socials. You'll be able to authenticate with maybe YubiKey or something like that. Something that can decrypt something in your browser to let your browser have a key. Maybe WebAuthn can play a role in that. This Web Authenticator proposal seeks to explore that and uses like key shares, I think was the term we put in the paper. So that way it's not one person that has your keys, like the Wax Cloud wallet. It would be that there are multiple decentralized parties where your key is broken up across all of them. Nobody has custody of your account. Everybody just has a little bit of information that you need in order to use your account. So we think that there's a possibility to do that, but that is a lot of effort to go that route. But to bring this all the way back to Unicove, we think it's possible for you to start in Unicove, like, you know, click create, and you create the account in Unicove, and it's like this low security thing. Low relative to, like, let's say high being Anchor or a Ledger wallet or something. Like you get the high security, but it comes at a cost. So you'll get this low security account, and then when you deem it appropriate, you can like upgrade. You know, you're like, oh, I have $1,000 now, and I think it's probably worth it if my web browser is not responsible for this $1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
There will be a process for you to be like, okay, I'm going to start using Anchor, and then you graduate into this. So it's a step up process, and it'll be non-custodial the whole way through. It'll hopefully be easy. It's going to require a lot of work to pull off and make secure. But it's possible. And I think the first step in our opinion on that side is to get Unicove to a place where people actually want to use it, and they want to use it with Anchor to start with. And then once it's to a place where people are like, yeah, this is a really good experience. If this was the only thing I had, this would suit my needs. And then we can like say, okay, how do we drop Anchor as a requirement? Anchor can still be used with Unicove, but like, how do we make it so it's no longer required? Because then it's even easier to use this product that people have deemed useful. So long-term, like probably multi-year, unless our team grows significantly, that's kind of the trajectory with Unicove. Is we want it to be, hey, do you want to use EOS? Do you want to use Wax? Do you want to use FIO? Like any of these blockchains, go to unicove.com, start your account, get started there. No downloads, no nothing. You get your sheet. Someday when you feel like, hey, I should really secure my stuff a little bit better than my browser, like, hey, download Anchor. Hey, buy a Ledger. And just this really nice upgrade path. And hopefully it'll be just as easy to use as it'll have all the traits of like the Wax Cloud wallet and what people really like about that. So it's kind of the dream behind Unicove. That's why it's a unicorn mermaid, because it's it's a crazy mix idea.
Well, it's a great vision, and it's a great the branding is awesome. I love it. So
yeah, our designers nailed that.
Unicorn's kind of like a horse.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit.
But with a horn.
With
But with a
horn.
horn.
And a mermaid lower half.
Something going on there. You've incepted all of us. Well, maybe we can switch it up a little bit. I'm kind of
Sure.
curious to ask you a little bit about your experience so far with Eden, and what your thoughts are on Fractally. I mean, you and I have been chief delegates together in this crazy experiment, and
Yeah.
it's been quite a ride. It's been really awesome working with you in that capacity, and Yeah, what do you think are the next steps with Eden? What's your experience been like generally? And like how has it changed from when we first set out on this journey to now? And where do you
Yeah.
think it goes next? And what's with how does Fractally fit into all this?
With Eden, I mean, it's changed a lot since we started. We really didn't know what it was. We were the guinea pigs. Um, there were some like test runs before, but this was the real run where we, like there's money now. It's not a ton of money, but like there's money involved in the process now. Um, it's been interesting to go from the situation where it's like, okay, maybe this is a system to elect leadership for the network, to this is funding, to this is both, to this is like it makes your head like it's dizzying if you actually think about how many different things we've considered Eden to be for. And I think now that we have less than a month left until the next election. I think personally, I'd really like to see the system focus in on the one thing that it's like proven that it can do, and that is to distribute funds to people with ideas. It's you don't have to write a proposal, you don't have to do some of the other things like you would with Pomelo or seeking a grant or anything like that. You just have to go and convince other people your idea is good and that money should be put towards it. And the political playoff process, in theory, weeds out, or it doesn't weed out bad ideas. That's the negative way to look at it. It helps elevate the good ideas. Like the best idea moves forward. And so I'm really interested to see that continue. I'm not everything else that we want it to do, I think is possible. Like it could elect the leaders, it could help govern, it could help set precedent for the network and help guide the network. But like it's not there yet. And I personally think we really need to focus on that one strong thing. On our most recent delegate call, I've been thinking about it since too. It's like maybe we align Eden to run with Pomelo. Like that has stuck with me. I think that that's potentially a strong way to do these cycles and really show that political playoffs work, because it gives Eden a really focused purpose. And if it can continue to prove that like it's not being abused, then we can start applying other responsibilities to it. And then I think on the flip side, when we're starting to talk about Fractally, the whole point when we started Eden was we need to prove that the system can't be abused. And if we can keep doing that through these elections, whatever frequency they are, it'll help also kind of lend credence to these other processes that are like the political playoffs, the Fractally processes, for example. Both of them really just, we need to hammer on them. We need to try to break them. We need to try to like socially engineer attacks against them, and prove that like these systems are solid. And once we prove that they're solid, like we can use them to drive consensus for maybe even like from the lowest of like small governance groups up to the highest of like, maybe this could help govern the chain. We don't know. We just need to prove that these things are rock solid. And once we do, then the sky's the limit for how you can apply like that technology. There's probably, I've never tried to draw this analogy before, but there's probably an analogy between like Eden and Fractally and Anchor. Like Eden and Fractally need to prove themselves as like solid systems before they can be used for a ton of other things. Just like Anchor needs to prove itself how useful and smooth it can be to prove that applications should be built. And like, this is the next way that we can authenticate with the internet.
I think it definitely did a good job at identifying leadership. Not that like you guys weren't already kind of known before the election, but if you look at the 6 people that made it to the chief delegates, it's the 2 of you, Jesse from Bees, who I think he really got elevated from this, because I didn't know who he was before that. It gave John a platform from Violet Garden. I mean, I didn't even remember him from when he was working on the Bancor stuff with EOS Nation. I totally didn't even know him then until the Eden came. Chris Barnes, obviously, he kind of became known from the trial elections, which helped build him up credibility leading up to the main election. So I miss Roland. I missed him. Am I missing another one? I can't.
No, Randall's the last one I think you didn't
Randall
mention.
Roland.
Yeah.
And Randall, man, like I never saw him before because he never had a profile picture, and I always just thought at one point I thought he was like a bot or someone's alt account, and then I realized he's like this awesome dude. He's got like I don't know how he does it. He's like some kind of doctor, medical doctor. He runs multiple practices. He does EOS support. He does the Eden stuff. Like all you guys are just supermen, and I think it proves a point also of like the need for more frequent elections because things change. Think about how much busier all 6 of you got since the time you were elected, that it's kind of like 6 months. Like from conversations I've had, people are the chief delegates are hoping that the next generation steps up because it's kind of like all of your plates are full. Chris is with Helios and the Telos Foundation. Lovejoy is with the EOS Foundation. Greymass, I don't even know why you did the election in the first place. You're already busy.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, to kind of touch on that, like when Eden was being talked about, it was literally the only funding mechanism being offered by the network. Pomelo had an unknown launch date, like the launch date wasn't announced. The ENF didn't exist, I don't think.
It was very new.
Yeah. There was nothing. Like Greymass was a block producer on a bunch of networks, and we were like, we need to grow our team. How can we do this? Let's try everything. And Eden was the first thing. It was the first option that we could actually like opt into and participate in. So I almost didn't participate. And people convinced me to. And there we go. But to kind of go to your point about leaders, like I really hope that we see this happen again. Like I'm most likely going to step back. I'm not committing one way or the other, but like I have enough on my plate as we've been talking about, but I'd really like to see the system elect some new leaders and see if it does the same thing to these new people. Like if any reason to step back and not run again, maybe it's to see if that repeats.
Mm-hmm. Man, it feels like forever ago because I forgot the reason Eden was so important because there weren't any other we've been deploying capital and I almost forgot how much of a barren desert we're in leading up to that Eden election. So the foundation, the EOS Foundation, only got its initial transfer of funds late August, and we obviously knew we were playing catch up and needed to deploy capital as quickly as possible. So we didn't have the manpowers, even to make all of these decisions. That's why we went with the recognition grants, because we couldn't really vet new ideas or new projects, but we could look in the rearview mirror and see like who's been building for years. And then it was like, how do we deploy capital to new ideas and new projects without having to spend like a ridiculous amount of time vetting everything? And Eden was like the perfect solution. And then also knowing that Pomelo was on the horizon, but not quite there yet. And it seemed to have worked out. I mean, a lot of capital got deployed. And then when Eden season 1 happened, or not Eden, when Pomelo season 1 happened, I feel like Eden played an integral part in making sure they kind of acted as like the proxy of like the EOS network and finding value in these Pomelo proposals. I can't remember the exact number of how many actual funds were contributed besides the matching funds, but I'd imagine that the Eden delegates represented probably at least, 30-40% of all of the donations that went into Pomelo. So they kind of acted as kind of like the filters for what should be funded via Pomelo. And that kind of ties into what you said earlier of like kind of marrying in a way Eden and Pomelo, because they do work together quite nicely. And I also liked what you said about lower barrier of entry, lower friction to get funding. You don't have to take the time to write out a proposal or wait until the next Pomelo season. So someone I just want to shout out that's been doing an incredible job with Eden is Chuck McDonald, for example. all of that. I know how hard it is to video edit. For him to do those condensed chief delegate videos, knowing how long they get and knowing how tedious that kind of work is, like he's putting an incredible amount of time in. He never had to put in, like he's in between Palmella seasons by the time he started doing that. And I know that I've talked to some of the chief delegates that they're able to just throw Eos like, man, I see the work you're doing here. Thank you.
Yep.
And it just lowers that friction and makes little stuff like that possible and reward value.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck is like one of the MVPs, I think, of this cycle of Eden, in that he was one of the people that stood up and kind of offered to help and provide some services alongside, you know, his role as delegate, and he's been awesome. I know he was kind of he's like, I got to stop taking all these ums and ands and buts out of this videos. This is too much, because our videos, our meetings have started getting a little ridiculous, but he's doing a great job.
I've done that kind of editing before. It is tedious, but when I was doing that was on my own ums and ahs, because I didn't want to look like I actually use them, and I do all the time. But it's just it's tedious. But yeah, I think Chuck, I'm imagining he'll run in the next election. I think he could do really well. I think Jesse will run again and do really well. I think maybe even another, you might see 2 Queen Bees in the next seats. I don't know.
We should start a prediction market to see if we can figure out who is going to be the chief delegates before they're elected. That'd be kind of fun.
We could do it. Predict works. I mean, it doesn't have a whole bunch of users, but the technology works. And you could, if you really wanted to.
Start a pool.
just don't use your Eden funds to do it.
All right.
We're good.
So looking at the clock, we are coming up on an hour. We probably edited some stuff out, but I did want to keep this relatively brief, even though an hour is not exactly brief, because we could always do these again.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you want to sit around and talk about EOS for multiple hours, come to the Fireside Chats every Wednesday, 20 UTC. Is there anything else either of you guys wanted to talk about in these last few minutes?
I mean, and I get scared to bring up new topics, because then I'm like, oh, I could talk for another half an hour about this one thing.
Aaron, I'm kind of curious if there's anybody that you think is kind of an unnoticed, like rock star in the community, or somebody that you're like, this guy is constantly producing or has something good to say, but isn't really like they'd be a good person to spotlight, or don't feel bad if you don't want to.
I think there are. I don't think I'm capable of just like pulling a name off the top of my head right now, but like if you tasked me to come up with a list, I probably could. It would be more of a just observing it and seeing it happen, and then jotting a new name down as it happens over the course of time. I'm just not one to remember exactly who said what, especially with how crazy this community is. Like something will happen and then there's like 10,000 messages about that thing, and it just drowns everything out. So I think we should be on the lookout for those people though, and try to elevate them.
I don't think he's underappreciated or unknown, but I would like to call it Dario. Dario is an absolute monster, and he has been for years. But I think with EOS support, he's gotten some support, and that is thanks to Eden and Palmello and other support that EOS support has gotten from the foundation that I think we owe them a blog article about at some point.
Maybe we can end on a fun note. Aaron, I know you've been working your butt off on all these blue papers and Anchor and everything for so long now, and you have a much deserved vacation on the horizon. Are you gonna get out of Dodge for a little while and just relax and not think about code for a minute?
Probably. I mean, this week I was actually planning on taking kind of a break, but the EOSIO branding thing, we've been doing meetings every day for it this week. I didn't know it was going to be every day this week, but there have been other meetings going on throughout the week. Like I'm still doing a lot of work this week that I haven't been able to say no to, but I think probably sometime this month I'll just disappear for a week or so. Need to get some good food, get out of this cold weather, take a break. There's a lot of things in life that I've been putting off for a while that I need to take care of. I mean, as this has grown, it's the visible example of neglect, of like personal neglect. So there's going to be a little bit of a slowdown, and then I imagine once like this blue paper period is over, where we're discussing it and we're kind of figuring out roadmaps and talking about this stuff, like come spring or summer, somebody's gonna like say go and flip the switch, and we got to go again. So right now, I think is the little bit of calm before the storm. And I am going to try my hardest to take advantage of it, because we got a lot to do this year, and I want to be rested up for it. Right now, I'm not.
Well, luckily, the very first proposal that's been funded and the work has begun for is a very talented team that was not on the blue papers, and that's OCI, Object Computing. They've been working on EOSIO as contractors to Block One for a very long time. They're very familiar with the software. They're already working on one of the proposals that came out of the API Plus blue paper, but they're most definitely not going to be the last team that's funded and contracted to fulfill the blue paper proposals. I'm sure Gray Mass will be on multiple initiatives, so rest up, because the next phase of work is going to begin. But hopefully it's work that you're more familiar, more comfortable with, where you're actually building and developing rather than reading and writing and just talking to people all day.
Yeah.
But it will ramp up again, and I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
But that means we're making progress.
Absolutely. And I'm hopeful that like that proposal that other team is working on now, I'm glad I can help contribute to those ideas and spark that for another team to do. And I hope there's a lot of examples out of the papers that we're able to do that with, where some team will come forward and say, hey, I could do that. And we have a conversation and we empower some other developers to take that idea and run, maybe with a little guidance, but it doesn't have to be exclusively like me or like, we need to grow the developer community, and this is a great opportunity to do so.
That's what I keep telling everyone I want to see. Just the blue. So Ted Cahill joined the foundation. It feels like he's been here forever, but he's been here like a month.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons he was able to get up to speed so quickly is because, one, he's just a workhorse and just asks a lot of questions. But the other is the blue papers. The blue papers allow someone that has the time and commitment to really read through them all. You get a pretty good bird's eye view of everything happening in all of the areas for improvement within EOS. And I think that's going to help significantly to like if you're a technical team and you just enter the EOSIO ecosystem, you can find your place, because teams like Gray Mass, EOS Nation, EOS Rio, Argentina, like lots more, Amsterdam, yada, yada. But they can't, like, there's not enough talent. Like we need to grow the talent pool. And what I hope happens out of not just the blue papers, but all of the other initiatives is teams like Gray Mass. You mentioned you hired at least one dev, but I don't know if he's the only one. There's other teams. The Nation's been hiring. Amsterdam, I believe, is hiring or growing. Everyone's kind of growing because now there's actually opportunities for growth, because there's funding opportunities to actually build stuff.
Yeah.
And Fractali's hiring too. They got some of the best devs. They hired like James Mart, for example. So what I'm hoping to see, James is in the ecosystem, so I'm saying like people outside is, as these teams start hiring, you're eventually going to get these people that once they get comfortable in the EOSIO ecosystem, they're entrepreneurial themselves after working for a team like Gray Mass for like a year or two. As much as you want to keep the best talent forever, some of these people are going to spin off and do their own things and build their own projects. And I think that's going to be where we're really going to see the fruits of all of this, is whenever we get to the point where we onboarded someone like either now or a few months ago or a few months in the future, and then they get comfortable enough, they grow in the ecosystem enough that they know the outlets. They could run through Pomelo, they could run through Eden. There's all of these different options of low-hanging fruit. Like there's a roadmap of how to get yourself bootstrapped or get your seed funding. and then they could spin off and do their own thing. And then first thing they need to do is, well, they need to hire people now too. And then it just creates this big avalanche of, I guess, talent growth, because that's something we haven't seen in EOS.io in EOS in quite some time. And I think over the next year or two, we're going to really start seeing that, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And on our side, we've hired 3 since we started on the Blue Papers. That's actually what most of the money we got from the Blue Papers went to, was to start filling in people that could help take the things that we were no longer doing and help us run with our ideas while we were off writing. So, and they were all external of the ecosystem. So we're training them and bringing new blood in. I think that's going to, while there's a couple people in the ecosystem I wouldn't mind recruiting, if we can pull from outside and train, that's, like you were saying, a great thing. So
I think a good mix of everything. Bring on the best people you can find, and then they act as mentors for anyone else you bring. Because it's not like EOS.io is like the most difficult thing. If you're a trained engineer, like, you learn it. Like, it doesn't take much to bring you up to speed if you have the right mentorship. Right now, the documentation part of Core Plus is to improve that on actually building dApps instead of launching blockchains. But we're getting there. All of the needs are identified. We'll keep working towards the finish line. That's just going to keep moving, but that's never ending job.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good spot to wrap up. I think we're probably at the edited hour mark now. So a good spot. So it's been a really long time. I felt embarrassed to do this with Dan on, because we used to always end these shows with a nice, friendly, synchronous Go EOS. And I think that's a good way to end this show, is a little Go EOS. So what do you guys say?
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it on 3. Ready? 1, 2.
Go
EOS!
EOS!
That was too quick.